Hey friends, my name's Stevie Taylor. Welcome to the Gig Life Podcast. My guest today is Craig Calhoun, a bass player, composer, arranger, audio engineer, and founder of the Brothers of Oz. Craig grew up on military bases through the US and Germany, and also spent time in Holland and a bit more in the US before moving to Australia in the mid-80s to forge out a career in music. The Supremes, Marcia, Hines, Renee, Geyer, Kevin Borich, Mark Williams and Erana, Clarke, and there's heaps more. There's a lot to Craig's story, so I'm not going to give any more away. You better stick around, Ladies and gentlemen, Craig Calhoun. Cheers. I think we're rolling.
Okay.
Craig Calhoun.
Yes.
Welcome to the Gig Life Podcast.
I'm delighted to be here, actually.
Yeah, mate, great stuff. And we're in your studio in the North Shore of Sydney.
Mm-hmm.
I really dig those speakers, man. Where are they? Where'd you get them from?
They're an old speaker called Tannoy Little Reds.
Yeah, Tannoy's good stuff, yeah.
Yeah, I had Opal events before that.
Oh, right, okay.
And
this sort of industry.
Yeah, which I was really happy, especially the bottom end. Yeah. I love the bottom end on them.
Yep.
But the getting the top end right is why I went for these, being the design.
Right, right. And you do a lot of mixing from here?
Yes.
Yeah.
I record it here, mix it here.
Yeah.
Drums, I might go into the school of TAFE that I used to teach at.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how long have you been into sort of the engineering side of things?
Wow. It goes back to about 12, 13.
Yeah,
Actually,
right.
before then, because
Cool.
I remember for my 10th birthday, my parents bought me a reel-to-reel recorder.
Yeah.
But it was the little small reels that only went for like a minute and a half.
Right.
And I remember loving the Jackson 5 because they'd just come out, but you could never get a whole song on it.
Right.
So that's when it started.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we moved to Germany.
Yep.
When I was 11.
So you were in Colorado at that?
We were in California at this stage.
California,
My father's in the Army.
Right, okay.
So we never really stayed anywhere too long.
Okay, right.
So by the time I was 10, I'd lived in Oklahoma, Kansas, Wisconsin, and then moved to California.
Right, okay. Yeah, and then...
in New Jersey, yeah.
Right, okay. Yeah, and when did the move to Germany happen?
1970.
Right, okay.
Yeah, 1970.
And that was because of father in the military?
My father in the military. Yeah. So the Vietnam War was on.
Okay.
And by that stage, he'd already been twice.
Right.
So we were on a nuclear missile base.
Right.
But in the countryside, in the northern part of Germany. So it's only something like, I think, 21, 25 U.S. soldiers.
Right.
And once a month, because you were so far from the big base, once a month you got to go to the main base and buy supplies and, groceries. And for the soldiers, they had basically access to everything, hi-fi equipment and really great things. So in the village that we lived in, I think there were 4 or 5 U.S. families. And me being the oldest kid, I got to babysit.
Right.
And so by the end of the month, I'd have $30 or $40, saved up, and we'd get a chance to go to the main base. And in the PX, which was the big department store on the base, albums were 99 cents. So I'd buy 30 or 40 albums just based on covers.
Right.
Take them home and then discover the music.
Oh, wow.
And because there were so many soldiers, that would be there for maybe a year or so, it was always transient.
Yeah.
They'd buy equipment and then sell it off really cheap. So I ended up buying, a really great hi-fi, and then ended up buying a reel-to-reel, a Sony reel-to-reel. So all those albums I bought, I would record.
Right.
And so my palette in music is just so broad because,
Yeah.
you know, you buy it for the cover and then discover the music, you know.
Right,
You didn't have
yeah,
any kind of judgment towards anything.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and I remember having first editions of a lot of albums. You know, but early Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, the first Eagles album, first Kiss album,
Right.
and comic books.
Yeah.
That was the other thing.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of comic books.
Yeah.
And my mother, her background was music. So on her family side.
Yeah, I was going to ask if music was in the family, yeah.
Yeah, it was her side. Her father played guitar, pedal or slide, you know, lap slide, and both the brothers played jazz and blues, and so I have early memories of sitting on the front porch of his place, you know, with him playing and that sort of thing. So by the time we moved to Germany, she had 7 kids.
Right.
Yeah. And one night they went out, and my parents went out, and she got up and sang with a band. And they found out where she lived, and then came and asked her to sing with the band.
Right.
So every weekend, she was singing like in the local areas and stuff, and I got to go along and watch that. So that was my upbringing.
See that stuff, yeah. And when did you start? Oh, sorry, it was would guitar have come before bass?
Yes.
For you?
Yeah. Sorry if I've kind of.
No, that's what it's all about, man. There's there's no water. We'll just go wherever.
Yeah. Having been exposed to music, I would have been about probably 7, 8, somewhere around there, maybe 9 even. And I've always had really vivid dreams. And there's American Indian on both sides of my family as well. But I used to be able to go to sleep or go to bed, and I'd close my eyes and I would see this like a slide, you know, those photographic slide carousels.
Yeah.
And it would spin around, and whatever, I could see what the slides were as it rotated, and whatever it would stop on, that's what I would dream about.
Right.
This would happen every now and then, you know, and I remember being really into the Beatles.
Yeah.
And I'd see them go around and wanted to stop on that, and then, you know, I would have a dream about the Beatles. And,
wow.
Growing up in the States, we had the Beatles cartoon, like a cartoon series.
Yep.
And I remember being so into the Beatles, and I got a job mowing lawns and being on military bases.
Yep.
You know, shining boots and pressing uniforms and things like that.
Yep.
And I remember saving up money and buying a guitar, an acoustic guitar, an nylon string, and buying my first record, which is a 45, and it was the Beatles.
Yeah.
Lady Madonna.
Lady Madonna, yeah. That's a good one.
And the flip side was something with sitar, one of the George Harrison songs.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember hearing that thinking, what is that? You know, what kind of instrument is that?
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's kind of where early part of the guitar started. And then I had a dream that I was on stage at a big outdoor festival. And I was just rocking the crowd, you know, the whole band was. And what it felt like when I woke up, that was it. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to know that feeling.
Yeah, right. That's cool.
You know, so that was my quest to really, you know, start pursuing it a bit more. And I had an older cousin who was right into rock and all kind of stuff, and he turned me on to a few things.
Yep.
He was the first one that played Hendrix for me, Electric Ladyland, but I didn't quite get it. I just heard a little bit of it. And my mother was out the front on the porch. This is back in California now, reading the paper, and I'm playing basketball in the driveway. And she's reading the paper, and she says, "Oh, Jimi Hendrix died today." And I went, "Oh, who's that?"
Oh, yeah.
You know, and then like a week later, I heard Band of Gypsies. You know, Machine Gun, Who Knows, and Band of Gypsies, and that just blew my mind. And that would have been September, because, he died in September.
Okay.
And then December, we moved to Germany. My father came home one day, and he said, how would you like to go to Germany? And I said, I wouldn't, you know. And because the vision I had in my head was this place that was just all bombed, you know. And
yeah, right.
I'm thinking, why would you want to go there?
Yeah.
And he said,
so you were totally aware of that at the time? where you would be going.
No, he just came home one day and.
No,
just,
I mean about the bombs of the war. You kind of.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You know, because as I said, by that stage he'd been to Vietnam twice.
Yep.
You know, the first time was in '65.
Yep.
When it was pretty hot, and you know, his time there was like a year.
Okay.
And he came back and he was home for a little while, and then he went back again, and I never understood why. And fast forward to, you know, nearly 40 years or so later, and he's visiting me here in Australia, and everybody had gone to bed, and my father and I sat up talking, drinking beers and everything, and he allowed me to just ask him anything I wanted to.
Yep.
You know, so I started asking, you know, about his childhood, and because he was the eldest of 11 kids.
Right.
And what that was like growing up in Georgia, in Atlanta, Georgia, you know, and the racism and, you know, only being allowed to go to school when it was too wet to work in the fields and things like that. You know,
Is that right?
That was his reality, you know, and when they did go to school, you know, it was like 6 mile hike, and, you know, the school buses would come by and kids would spit on them, you know, and, you know, just that was his reality.
Right.
So as soon as he could, he wanted to join the services.
Yeah.
So I think he was just 18 or something like that, and he joined the services, and it was kind of towards the end of the Korean War. So he got sent to Korea. And being 10 years older than my mother, he came back, gone to Korea, went to France, and this is interesting. He he tried to marry someone there and bring her back to the U.S. She needed a physical to be allowed to come, and that they hadn't married yet. And he said that this doctor that had to do the physical was really racist and claimed that she had a spot on her lung, I think it was on her lung or her heart, and said no, she's not fit to go. And so he wasn't allowed to. And he knew, you know, there was nothing wrong, because apparently she'd gone and seen, you know, a French thing, and so that never happened.
Yeah.
So he came back to the U.S. and was stationed in Kansas, and my mother had been singing before she finished school with her brother. So she was still in high school. Her brother's older, and he finished school 2 years later. He's in Kansas with a band, and she wanted to go and sing with him. And her mother said, well, once you graduate, you can go. So she graduated and went to Kansas. Yep. And one night, my father and his best mate walked in, and he saw her, and he just was smitten, and he said to his friend, I'm going to marry her.
Yeah, right.
You know, it was one of those
stories, yeah. Awesome. Yeah.
And he chased her, and, you know, she didn't want to know. She was like 18, 19.
Yep.
And, you know, he kept courting her and doing all that, and then, you know, eventually they dated, and I think a year or so later, you know, they got married.
Cool.
Yeah, and then a year after that, I came along. You know.
Yeah. Yep. Oh, so you're the first child.
I'm the first child of 7.
Yeah. Okay.
So 5 boys, 2 girls. So.
All right. And were your brothers and sisters musicians?
I'm the only one who went that route.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
I'm the only one who went that route. They're musical.
Yeah.
And dance and rhythm and all of that stuff.
Sure.
And because I had, you know, a calling at such an early age, I mean, I knew what I wanted to do.
Yep.
It's only now in my grown-up years that I really got to understand how fortunate I was.
Yep.
You know, to come from a very happy family.
Yep.
Incredibly happy family. And to have found something that I wanted to do. And my parents just realizing that and saying, okay, well, we'll support you. We just want you to go through school, get your schooling. That was my dad's words. Just get your schooling.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't allowed to. You know, and so, yeah, they supported me doing that. And so let's fast forward now.
Sure.
Back to moving to Germany.
Yep.
You know, so I'm 11, I think at 11, 12. And our parents go out. She gets up and sings with the band. and they find out where she lives and ask her to come sing with the band on the weekend. So I got to go along, and my first performance on stage was with them. I was playing guitar.
Yep. Self-taught guitar? Yeah, right, okay.
Yeah, I didn't have teachers.
Yep.
So I had this dream that I was on a stage, and that was my pursuit to do that.
Yep.
I didn't know how to tune the guitar.
Okay.
So what I would do is I'd look at an album cover, I'd say, okay, I'm going to play like Eric Clapton, and I'd look at a Cream album, and whatever direction the tuning pegs were in, I would turn it to match the picture, thinking, okay, now I'm playing like him, and then I'd pick up a Hendrix album and, and do that. Or
flip it around. And
no, just turning the little knobs,
Right.
The tuning keys.
Yeah.
And that's how I thought you tuned a guitar,
Right.
And obviously it wasn't sounding all that great.
Right.
But someone finally showed me how to tune it.
Right.
And from then on, I would spend 5-6 hours a day.
Yeah.
I'd go to school, come home, do my homework, and just play guitar. And
where were you getting your chords from?
I wasn't really playing chords. I didn't know.
Oh, okay, right.
So
you just do melodies and yeah.
Playing the guitar.
Right, gotcha.
Yeah. I didn't know chords.
Yep.
So I'm making it up as I go. And I remember thinking, man, how amazing Hendrix was. Not realizing I'm hearing multi-tracked guitars.
Yeah.
I'm thinking this is one person playing all these parts. Which was interesting, but then I got this reel-to-reel, and because I didn't have anyone to play with, this was one that allowed you to record on one track, bounce it to the next track, and play at the same time. So what I did is I quickly realized that if you're going to play something, if you're going to play the first part, you need to play it with a structure, because if you're going to jam to it, you need to know where it's going. And that's what I did, not realizing that, in actual fact, I'm multi-track recording. And it also taught me the discipline of rhythm and playing in time.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, playing your part.
Playing your part.
In one shot,
And playing in time.
Yep.
And...
and this is not along to drums, or this is just playing in time to yourself, basically.
Because I didn't have anyone to play drums.
Sure.
I had a drum kit. The one that my mother's drummer gave to me. It was a Sonar, which would be something now.
It sure would.
And didn't have drum machines. So I started doing that, and I remember I used to do things like I had a microphone, and I'd act out like I was interviewing somebody. And what do you think of this? And then all of a sudden I'd cut in a piece of a lyric from a record or something and record that. I was really adventurous with sound. I was doing some really crazy things because nobody told me I couldn't.
No rules, eh?
No rules, and everything was new. So and also babysitting at a lot of these different houses, I got exposure to really great audio equipment,
Right.
So, I get to play their systems and discover their music as well. So sound has always been a real big thing for me. And so Germany was really something. The first 2 years I went to an English boarding school. So we'd have to leave the house at like 6:15 in the morning. And me being the oldest child, I was in junior high school, and the rest of them were in elementary school, or primary school, you guys call it. And it was like a 40-minute ride in one direction to take them. So we'd get picked up in this Volkswagen bus. And we'd take them 40 minutes that direction, and then another 30 minutes to take me in the other direction. School started at 8:15 in the morning for me and finished at 4:10. And then they'd have picked up the other kids, grabbed me, and then we'd get home probably about 6. So it was like nearly a 12-hour day. I'd have dinner, do homework, and then I would
Then you
practice.
jam, yeah. Yep.
As a result of that, even to this day, I average about 4 hours sleep.
Yeah.
I've just kind of always been like that.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
If I sleep, like 7 or 8 hours, I wake up more tired than.
Yeah, it happens, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's kind of been my regime. So I fit in a lot.
Yeah.
I get a lot of things done,
That's
and,
cool.
and being such a curious and inquisitive person, always thirsting for knowledge.
Yep.
I teach myself all kind of things.
Yep. That's really cool.
Yeah.
So what stage did you start getting into bands?
Okay. So I started playing in Germany.
Yep.
Wasn't in bands.
Sorry, yeah. Let me phrase that. Start playing with other people and
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, with other people. Very first time in a sort of band was just prior to going to Germany.
Okay.
So this is back in the States. I'm
Oh,
in
right, okay.
year 6.
Yeah.
And we put together a band to play at the school talent show.
Okay, cool.
So I had a friend who played drums, had a friend who didn't play, and I told him he was going to play bass.
Yep.
So I gave him bass and showed him how to play.
Mm-hmm.
A James Brown song and this other song by a band called El Chicano. And our first gig was at a baseball game. Just in between innings, we went out and played the 2 songs. And then the next gig was at the school talent show, and we did James Brown and one other thing.
Cool.
Won the talent show, and then shortly after that, we moved to Germany.
Right, okay.
So,
And were you, did you do much with your music in Germany? Apart from sort of going off bass and...
no, I was still playing guitar at the stage.
Yeah.
So my first performance on stage was with...
No, I'm sorry, what I meant by going off the military base and heading out to get your music and bringing...
No.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
I get your question now.
Yep.
What really accelerated my playing is after going to the English school for 2 years, I then had to live at that main base where we'd go once a month. I had to board there.
Yep.
And being a military base, they look after their soldiers, so they have access to all kind of activities, and music being one of them. So they would have this music hall, and it would be several rooms that were like plexiglass soundproofed, and they'd have drum kits in each one. You could check, all you had to do was show your ID, and you could check out any guitars, amps. All the amps would be in the room in the drum kit, so you could check out Fenders and Gibsons and Epiphones, and that's all you had to do was just book it and go and do it.
Awesome.
And being so many soldiers, that's what really made me push myself, because I'd go in and just end up jamming with people who were way beyond myself.
Right.
So it'd make me step up.
How cool is that? That's awesome.
And that was an incredible experience.
Yeah.
And when there wasn't anybody in there, I'd just go and check out a bass and then, play bass, or I'd go and check out drums.
Yep.
And that also taught me how the instruments sound and what they're like,
Yep.
Still, there was no formal, learning how to read music or anything. We
Right.
just play it,
Yep. Yep. And what happened after Germany?
So we moved back to California, but a different part of California, Monterey.
Uh-huh.
And on an army base again. And I was playing guitar. I was okay by this thing, I could play. And I saw somebody slap.
Uh-huh.
And that was it. That was like, wow, I want to do that.
When you say you saw somebody slap, was
Slapping a bass.
Yeah, but was it in a club or a pub or something? Did you know who the person was, or did you?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was a bar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And yeah, I saw somebody do that. I was 16 at the time. And I just thought, how cool is that? And it was a Sly and the Family Stone song. And having been totally into Sly, you know, having seen Woodstock and all that as a kid, I'd heard that sound because I had the albums, you know, but I didn't know what that was, you know.
Right.
It's just one of those things before, you know.
Did you even know it was bass at that time on the albums?
Not really.
No.
You just knew it was a sound. It's like hearing sitar, you know.
Yeah.
And then when you see somebody do it, and you think, that's really cool.
Yeah.
And the same cousin that turned me on to Hendrix, he had a bass because his flatmate works for Fender. And then made a bass for himself, and then got behind in rent. So he gave the bass to my cousin.
Right.
And my cousin, who, you know, always pushed me with music, he gave it to me. I still have it. I still play it.
Yeah, right. Awesome.
It's Precision.
Yeah.
And, man, once again, I get the bass, and I was spending 5-6 hours a day just working out how to do it. You know?
Right. Yeah.
Until I got it. And I then switched to bass. You know, I just stopped with the guitar. And there was a much older band in town, and they were looking for a bass player. And there was myself and another kid named Anthony Wilkerson. We were like both around the same age and same stage of playing. And we both auditioned, and Anthony got the gig. And I thought, okay, more work. So I just went back into it, and a year later, they heard me play. There was a battle of the band, and I had put together this band. And they heard me play, and then they asked me to play with them, and I just thought, nah, it's okay. Yeah, it's great to actually say that.
Would that have meant sort of getting rid of your mate?
Yeah, getting rid of my band. And but it was just...
getting rid of your mate out of that other band, the guy that...
No, because they weren't happy with him. He wasn't very professional.
Okay, right.
You know, they loved his playing, but, you know, he was late for things or wouldn't turn up and stuff like that, you know. And so they went on the hunt and asked me, you know, because it was nice to be able to turn it down. You know? So I was hooked. I was hooked on bass. My father then retired, and we moved back down to Southern California. Around the beach, Laguna Beach, Newport Beach, all that area there. I got a call one day to audition for this band. And at that time, in that area, there were two bass players. We were rival kind of bass players, and it was myself. And my influence was, for slap, Larry Graham. For soloing, Stanley Clarke. And for sound, Bootsy, you know. So I used to actually get called Baby Bootsy, man. I was
really?
Because of sound. I'm so into sound, you know. And Melvin was Jocko and, you know, that sort of thing. Which, man, when I heard Jocko, I didn't know what I was hearing. I was just like, that, I can't even go there, you know. But Melvin was really into that. And they contacted him to play with this band, and he said, no, you know, give Craig a ring. And they called, and it was the lead singer. It was a singer and the guitar player, and I came and met with them, and we clicked. We found a keyboard player and a drummer, and we called ourselves Zazo.
Cool.
So you'd say ZZA, ZZO. Our audience were wealthy white kids, you know. And, you know, for your 16th birthday, you get a Mercedes, that sort of thing. It was the OC, that TV show, the OC. That was our audience, you know. Them and their parents. And we were playing in a club one night. Wow. I'm going to go into this because I've been working on my autobiography. And I went back and caught up with the guitarist from back then, and he filled in a piece of a puzzle that I didn't get. So I will tell you about it. There was a chain of these two really well-known restaurants called The Quiet Woman. And we had a residency, like a 1-month engagement at one of them, the one in Newport Beach. And I think, you know, it's probably maybe our second week there. And we were playing, and then all of a sudden we were asked to move, not finish the month out, we were asked to move to the other restaurant. So I'll just leave you with that story from now.
Okay.
And I'll lead up to it.
Okay.
So we're doing this show at the second restaurant now. And we get to the end of the night where we announce the last song, and a couple of guys walk in. And we play the song, and then one of them comes up and says, "Hi, my friend back here, Jim, would like to give you $100 to play another song. We really like your band." So we played another tune, and he came up and asked for one more. So we did another, and then he gave us a couple $100, and we went back and had a chat to them. They gave us the money. And he was saying that they had flown down from San Francisco. They started a production company, and they had been there looking for acts to sign, and they'd seen quite a few things and were unimpressed, and were on their way back to their hotel and happened to pass by, saw us, and wanted to offer us a contract. So we met with them, and they offered us something like a 5-6 page contract, and we took it to this lawyer who was Linda Ronstadt's lawyer at the time. We'd done a show for him, and as a favor, he ended up rewriting the contract. So it went from like 5 pages to 25 pages. Mm-hmm. And he wrote it in such a way that, because this was their first venture, that if anything went wrong, we didn't come out owing any money.
Right.
We were given a $9,000 advance. We were flown to San Francisco, or the other side of the bridge, Mill Valley. We were given a 5-bedroom house. There were 5 members of the band, and a 16-track studio with 2 engineers. We were paid $300 each a week to be in the studio from 11 to 5, mm-hmm. just creating music. Mm. Anything you wanted, any equipment you wanted, they bought it. I mean, I had like a 3-way active bass rig, and I didn't even know what that was. I turned up, and Music Man had just come out, so I asked for a Music Man bass.
Yeah.
And being such a prolific, creator of music, I went to town. I mean, I knew about recording already, Yeah. So we were just generating all kind of music. And I was the youngest member of the band, so I'm like 19 by this stage. The other guys were 23, 24. And they would go out and party and do all that stuff. And, I would just be there, still taking it all in. After about 6 months, we went into one of the main studios in San Francisco, Wally Hyder's studio, and I think Santana was in Studio A, and we were in Studio B. And we had a producer on board by this stage, a horn and string arranger from Count Basie's orchestra, and they brought in Dolly Parton's drummer to play drums. They brought in Don Grusin to play keyboards, and somebody else to play guitar. But the only ones that they really kept on most of the stuff was myself and the singer. By this stage, $100,000 had been invested, and because the project was going so well, another $100,000 was invested. They bought land because they were going to build a studio. I mean, this whole project was going on because they were so happy with what they found, and we were just a real hardcore funk band, especially in those times. And the music started being altered, because now there's horns and string arrangements, and eventually we got to meet the main investor and kind of express that, wow, we're not really happy with how this is sounding, And it ended up that the guy who discovered us and the investor ended up having a fallout about this project, and turns out that he was embezzling money as well. So, the thing had been going on for a year. Because I'm now 19, about to turn 20, I think I might have turned 20 by this stage. I'm not old enough to go out in California because you got to be 21. So while all the other guys were out partying and everything, I was in the studio learning how to operate all this stuff. So the project comes to a standstill. It stops. Within 1 week, it's finished. And we had to go back to Southern California. I bought myself a car, so I I drove back. I took my time driving back, you know. And I remember, because I've always heard music, always hear music in my head, and having taught myself to play, if I hear it, I can just go for it and record it, you know, and put it down.
Yep.
And I remember driving back through the desert, and this song came to me. Music, lyrics, everything. And because I couldn't write music, I didn't have a recorder, all I could do was just pull over and write the lyrics down.
Yep.
You know, so I'm singing it to myself the entire time, you know, until I get home. And I get home and I go to the guitar and I go up and down the fretboard and I can't find the first note that sounds like this song. Do the same on the bass and I do the same on the piano. And it's like none of the notes sounded like, you know, not even the first note of the song or even the same key. And so fast forward from there to the band's finished, you know, we've come back. Two of the guys had given up music. And I'm ringing around to them because my attitude was, well, what's next, you know? We had this thing, so this is just the first part of the journey. What's next? So I'm ringing the guys and saying, hey, you know, let's keep this together. If I book some gigs, you know, you guys play. And I finally got the two guys who gave up music to come back on board.
Yep.
And I booked a show, and that was cool. And then I went to there was a nightclub in Orange County that had a sign out the front, paid auditions for bands. And the deal was you go, you audition, if they liked you, they paid you for the audition and you got a 2-week engagement. So I go there one afternoon and I ask for the owner of the place and he takes me outside. This is in the afternoon and we're standing outside and I'm giving him the spiel on the band and showing him the, you know, the brochure and the background, and he looks at it and he goes, 4 black, and 1 white, I don't want any black people in my club. Just straight up, you know, and I just looked at him in total disbelief, you know, and, you know, I grabbed my things, and I went home, and on my way home, I'm thinking, well, you know, if this is what I got to deal with, why stay here? You know, I had already experienced other countries, and, and I saw, you know, what my mother had done over there. Yep. So I went home, told my parents what had happened, and said, I'm leaving. You know, and they understood, you know, but I didn't want to leave my family because we were all very close.
Yep.
But I knew that why stay here if you got to deal with that?
Right.
You know, so I sold what I had, and a year later I bought a one-way ticket to Germany. I was 21 by this stage, and went back to the village that we lived, ended up catching up with the drummer from my mother's band, and he was with a singer and a guitarist, and they'd been looking for a bass player. So I started playing with those guys, well, rehearsing with them. It was all original stuff. And just before we were about to, you know, get serious and do, you know, book a couple of shows, I got a call, because I'd left my name and number at a music store when I first arrived. I got a call to do a European tour with the Supremes. And I was like, really? You know? So I said to these guys, hey, I'm sorry, I got to take this one, you know. So, I do the tour. And for those guys, they ended up continuing on with their career, but they didn't get another bass player. So they call themselves Trio. And they had a hit song called Da Da Da, which turned out to be that theme for that Sakata, you know, the crackers.
Oh, yeah, I know the song. I know the Da 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 song. Yeah. That was their hit. Oh, okay.
So, you know, my path goes this way, and they continue on doing that.
Yeah, great.
So I go on the road with the Supremes, and, man, that was a real dream come true for me. Yeah. And what I hadn't realized was how much James Jamerson had influenced me.
Yeah, right.
You know, because when it comes to playing a groove, that's where I sit.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And I remember on the tour, we went to Berlin, and we had a Romanian sax player because he had defected. He had to fly in, and we had to, myself and the drummer and the guitarist, they were twin brothers, and we drove in. And I didn't realize at that time that Berlin was like a few hours inside of East Germany. Mm-hmm. I always thought it was on the border, so we get to the last border between East and West and cross into the East, and it was like time stood still. Mm. All the tractors that you saw in the field were, like from the 40s and 50s, and cars and things. And because you're inside Eastern Bloc country, you couldn't stop your car and just get out and walk around because, you could be taken away. So you could only stop at designated places. Mm. And we eventually get to Berlin, and you go through the last checkpoint Charlie, and then you're in this city that's just modern. And I'm kind of getting off track.
No, it's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just kind of lost the plot.
No, that's cool. Well, I was going to pull it back to, you said that you didn't realise how much James Jamerson had influenced your playing.
Yes.
Did you know who he was at the time?
I didn't know his name.
Okay, so it wasn't until you sat down and started learning the Supreme stuff? Did you find out who he was? And
no.
And then
I
already kind of play like this.
Yeah.
Yeah, right, okay.
It always felt natural to play that way to me.
Yeah.
To hear lines like that.
Yeah.
It wasn't...
Because that's what he did. He heard lines, played them like nobody else did.
And that's how I work. I hear lines.
Yep.
Actually, you just reconnected me back to...
Cool. Yep.
The tale about hearing a song while driving and not being able to find it. Mm-hmm. So I've left the U.S. I'm in Germany, do the Supremes tour. Supremes tour finishes, and the guitarist and keyboard player and I end up going to the Swiss ski resorts and playing as a 3-piece cover band doing that. Mm-hmm. I find out that they'd been ripping my pay off, for like an extra $1,000 I was meant to be paid per month.
The other two guys?
Yeah, the other two guys, and so I find that out, and I stop and I break with them. And I had met a drummer from Holland, and he said, if ever you're going to start a band, come to Holland and you've got a drummer.
Right.
So once I found out they'd been ripping me off, I just got in the car and went to Holland, rang him up, and turned up at his place. And the day I arrived, he was going for a meeting because he would volunteer at this youth center. I went along with him, and they were working out. It was a art gallery and a youth center, and they were working out what the activities were for the week. Mm-hmm. And when they got to Sunday, they didn't have anything booked, and I said, well, if I put together a band, can I play for the door? And sure. So I had a drummer, and the keyboard player that was with me in Holland kept calling me, asking if he could come. And so he came, so that was, the three of us. We called ourselves Future, found a guitar player, and the first week we played, we had like 13 people. Mm-hmm. Next week, it was double that, and it just kept building until it became a scene. Mm-hmm. And it got to the point that we were... It was a health, a danger because of the fire,
Okay, yeah.
And so there was one performance we were meant to do that they had told us to shut it down, and we had already set up. So what they did is they put police officers around the building and wouldn't allow anyone in. Mm. I've actually got photographs of all of this stuff. So, yeah. So shortly after that, I'm doing a recording session, and they had hired the first DX7, in the country. So I'm at this session, and they hired...
My dad had a DX7, so I know DX7. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, love those.
Yeah, so, at the end of the session, it had to go back to the hire place the following day, which was near my house, so I offered to take it back, which meant I got to play with it. Yeah. So I'm there that night, and I'm going through the presets, blah, 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 preset, and I hit this one sound, and it was that song. in my head.
Right. The song from when you're driving.
From when I was driving. And that's when I realized that there's another dimension to music, and it's not about the note.
Yeah.
That's why I couldn't find it. It was about the sound.
The sound, yeah.
And the moment I hit that sound, I was able to realize that song, and I actually made it. That night, I made it come to life. So that was a really interesting discovery. That there's this other dimension to it.
Yep.
Another incident with learning like that is I also did a session, and they had the first Lindrum.
Cool.
And once again, I offered to take it back, which meant that night I got to play with it.
Cool.
And what I did is record it on my reel-to-reel. I'd create beats, record it onto tape. I did this all night, so I had like hours and hours of drum beats from a Lindrum.
So cool.
Which meant, I now had a drum to jam to.
Yeah.
So I created a lot of original music way back then with drum loop. Well, they weren't. Yeah, they were loops, but I'd record maybe 4 or 5 minutes of it.
Yeah. That's cool. All right. So how do we get to be in Australia? Now, did you toured with Chris Hines? Is this right?
Yes.
Do you want to talk about him a little bit?
That's how that.
Yep.
I get a call to do a recording session for this guy who DJing was starting to happen. DJ scratching and rap.
Yep.
Was starting to happen then. Mm-hmm. And Chris had this. He was really a progressive, forward thinker. Had his own studio, and he had this idea to create drum loops, and then hired me to come and create bass lines to go with them, and then sell it as an album.
Yep.
So that you could scratch with and this and that. And man, I wish I had a copy of it now. So that was how we met, and then shortly after that, he gave me a call to do this tour, which was a fusion of classical flute, which he played, but with effects.
Yep.
Senegalese percussion that also sang, an Indian percussionist from Madras, India, a synth jazz guitarist, and funk bass.
Wow.
And it was a fusion of all of those things, and the pieces were anywhere from 10 minutes to 18 minutes in length.
Yeah.
And because I don't read music, I had tried, but for some reason it just didn't work for me, and I didn't know till many years later, while having my son assessed, that I discovered I'm dyslexic. And I'm sitting there while she's doing the test, and I'm getting the same results he's getting.
Yeah, right. Okay.
And that kind of explained why my issue with printed music is my eyes don't really scan from left to right, and then go back to the next line. It just moves all over the place.
Right.
Funny story. I remember getting a job with Marcia Hines to do a tour, and they sent me all these charts.
Yeah.
And I obviously couldn't read them.
Yeah.
And I went to a friend of mine and got him to help me. And I saw throughout several charts there was a little thing that said simile, but being dyslexic, it looked like smile.
Yeah.
So I thought, wow, how cool is this? They've got little markers in here for you to look up from your music and smile at the audience. So I put little happy faces.
Right.
He still talks about that to this day.
Yeah.
So Chris asked me to come on board, and we toured Europe, and Don Burrows saw us and then invited us to Australia.
Right. And which year was it? What year was it?
That was 85.
85, yeah.
So we came here, the first port of call was Perth.
Yep.
We were 10 days in Perth, 10 days in Melbourne, and then 10 days here in Sydney. We did the basement, 2 days at the basement, and then we played the Opera House. And at that time, in Holland, before Chris came on board with this, I was about to move to London.
Okay.
Kind of done quite a lot in Holland. I was going to move to London.
Yep.
And then I got offered that tour. And when he announced we were coming to Australia, I knew nothing about Australia.
Yep.
I wasn't even really sure where it was.
Yep.
And I'll never forget, having grown up in the military and moved so many times in my life, I never really felt home anywhere. And we left Holland, it was like -10, and we arrived at Perth. It was like 28 degrees at night. And I remember walking to the front of the plane as the door was open, and this warm gust of wind hit me with this eucalyptus smell.
Yeah, I've got the same story. Sorry, when we moved from New Zealand to Australia,
Yeah.
when we left Wellington Airport, you know, we had our woolen jumpers on and it was cold, man, jeans. And then, got off the plane and those doors opened at Sydney Airport and it was just like getting whacked in the face. 36 degrees, like, whoa.
Right.
Anyway, sorry, back to you.
No. And you know, it was the one thing about the wind and all that, the smell, but instantly I had this feeling like I was home.
Yep.
You know, I'd never experienced that anywhere. I felt like this is where you're meant to be. And we got to the hotel, and I stayed up all night. I just went walking all night long, just waiting for the sun so I could see what this place looked like. You know, I was just blown away. You know, and so we did the festival hall in Perth, and you know, meeting Australians for the first time. That was like, yeah. Having gone to an English boarding school, it wasn't that foreign to me.
Yep.
But it was, I couldn't believe how open everything was, you know, how innocent. And that was my take on Australia, like the last frontier of the Western world.
Yep.
And very innocent, you know. And we're doing these shows, and they're filming it for the ABC. And because I memorize all my parts, I'm not looking at sheet music. So, you know, I'm the one that has the interaction with the audience.
Yeah.
And the camera and all that, you know.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm performing.
That's where that sort of begins, eh? The whole showy thing.
Well, I thought if you're playing music, you're playing for somebody. So it's about that connection. I mean, if you come and see me play, you know, I make it a point to look at everybody.
Yep.
And look them in the eye and make that contact. You know?
Yep.
Because I'm just grateful you're at my show.
Yeah.
Because to me, the most precious thing that I have is time. You know, and I have no idea how much of it I have. So I literally, and my mantra is to fill it with as much happiness as I can. So, you know, if this is the last thing I do on this earth right now, I'll do this with you.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, you're smiling, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. And so, time.
Yeah. Yeah. So when that tour ends, what happens after that?
Okay, so we're here for a month. I've got to go back to Holland. I had already decided I was moving here.
Okay.
And the other thing that was a real bonus, because I'm grateful for people giving me their time, at the end of the shows, I would go and talk to them.
Yep.
And I would say, well, first of all, it blew my mind how big Australia was. I had no idea, you know, and I'd meet people that had relatives that they'd never seen because they're so far away. It was like, you know, $1,500 to fly here. And so I'd say, well, listen, we're going to Melbourne, we're going to Perth. Give me your friends or your family's number, and I'll ring them and invite them to the show. You know, which I did. You know, and I still have that network of people to this day. You know? I kind of did that all my life because I love what I do so much that I gladly invite people to come and see me play. You know, and so I'd get to Melbourne and I'd ring up all those people and say, hey, your cousins or your family, you know, put me on to you, and I'd like to invite you to my show. And so by the time my tour had finished here in Australia, I had met some incredible people. And when I came back here, those same people, when I put in an application to be a resident here, those same people wrote incredible testimonials for me. You know, I had Double J, which it was then. Arno Frollo's wrote one. I had some major companies saying that my skills were an asset to the country.
Wow, awesome.
So I came back, ended up getting a tour with Kevin Borich.
Yeah, right.
So that was my introduction to the road here. I remember the first time. Our first gig was in, somewhere near the other side of Eden, 6 hours or so, from here.
Yep.
And I remember we were driving on the Great Western Highway, or Princess Highway, whatever it was, and thinking, wow, we're still around houses and things, And I said to him, when are we going to hit the freeway?
Yeah.
And they laughed, and that's when I learned, okay,
it's a bit different.
The road is the road here.
Yeah, that's right.
And man, what an invaluable experience. I toured with Kevin for nearly 4 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. And okay, so what came after the Kevin?
So, my first daughter was born. I decided to cut the touring back a bit, and this drummer Chris Sweeney gave me a call because there was a band called Wawani that was starting, and I was asked to play bass. So started rehearsing with them, and Paul Gray. I was giving lessons to his brother, and we were about to do the debut, the record had been done, and we were about to do this debut performance. And that afternoon, I get a call from immigration saying, Craig Calhoun, you've overstayed your visa. You have 24 hours to leave the country. And I had submitted, some months prior to that, I'd submitted, an application as a resident. And I asked them, did you see my application? He said, no, I haven't seen it, but I'll check and give you a call back. And he ran back and he said, okay, we found it.
Yeah.
Which means that you've submitted it before this has happened.
Cool.
So you have two choices. You can either have us process it from here, or you can leave the country and apply from outside the country. He said, if you stay here and do it, we don't look at it too favorably, but we have to consider it. But if you leave the country and apply from out there, then you're doing the proper way to do it. So I was meant to play with Wawani that night, so I rang their management, and they said, we don't want to take a chance.
Yeah.
Immigration turns up at the show. So I had to get Paul's brother to step in.
Yep.
And the following night, I was with Kevin Borich opening for Santana at the Entertainment Center, and I thought, they can come and arrest me there. I don't care. I'm not gonna pass on that one.
No. Critical.
And I turn up at the sound check, and Buddy Miles is singing lead vocals for Santana.
Shit.
Yeah, and so I'm blown away with meeting Buddy, Santana, but Buddy was the one, And so we did the show, and after Buddy Miles and I just hung out, we went back to the Siebel Townhouse, hung out all night long, and the next day I'm meant to be on a plane. Turns out we're both on the same plane.
Cool.
Yeah. So, and the story in LA, making the application.
Yeah.
Because I had already gone through all the process.
Yep.
I had everything, all the applications and all the letters and everything. So I go to the consulate in LA and, do the application, put it in. I pay the fee, but you have to go and get a money order. So I get a money order for the correct amount and put the thing in. And they said, okay, you'll hear from us in about 3-4 days. I wait, didn't hear anything, so I ring them up. They said, we haven't been able to process your application because the Australian dollar has devalued. So you've actually overpaid us. I said, well, just
take it.
Just keep the balance. And they said, we're a government department. We're not allowed to. It has to be the exact amount. So I've got to drive, for like 2
Sorry,
hours.
did you have to contact them, or did they contact you?
I contacted them because I hadn't heard anything.
So they weren't going to contact you until...
Well, they probably would have.
Yeah, right.
But, I'm the one that's...
Yeah, of course, yeah. Getting a bit anxious there.
Yeah, so I have to drive up to LA now, and put in another money order for that amount. So I do that, wait a few days, follow it up again. They said, the dollar's devalued again.
No,
what? Yeah. So twice this happens, So I go up and I said, find out what the rate is right now, you know. So I go and I get the money and I give it to them. And so that's underway now. Yeah, I eventually get a call back saying your application is almost done. We're just waiting to hear from the Swiss police that, you know, you have no offenses over there. So I go in, I said, listen, you know, if that's all you're waiting on, please just let me go.
Yep.
And if you find something, I'll gladly leave, but, you know, I haven't done anything wrong.
Sure.
And they agreed to do that.
Awesome.
And, you know, she gave me the stamp, and then she actually said, we've never processed anybody this quickly.
Yeah, right.
You know, it's a blessing that I had everything already together.
Yeah, cool.
And, yeah, another little funny story is right after I left there, I left the consulate, and I go to my car, and there's a Volvo parked in front of me with this car keys hanging out the door. Mm-hmm. And I take the keys and I look around to see if there's anybody, and I go to the nearest, there was a house, and I go to the house and I said, listen, you know, these people, whoever it is, has left these keys, I just want to give it to somebody. And sure enough, later that night I get a phone call, and I left my number, and this woman, you know, rings me to thank me for giving her the keys, and she said, you know, I'd like to give you a reward. And I said, oh, listen, I've just got approval to go to, you know, back to Australia, so I'm going to be leaving. And you know, told her what I did, music and that. And she said, oh, my late husband was a bass player. And he played upright bass. And she said, I'd like to give you the bass. And I just said, listen, I'm sorry, I can't take it. You know, I don't have room for it. I mean, in hindsight, I should have gone and met, because I have no idea who she was. It was a black woman.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know whose bass this might have been, you know.
Yeah, have you ever thought who it...
Oh, man, I often think who it might have been.
Yeah.
Because she said he was a pretty serious musician.
Right.
Yeah, and, yeah.
Anyway, one that got away, eh?
Yeah, it's one that got away.
All right, so you're back to Australia. Is it back to Wawani? Or they sort of...
They've gone on now.
They've gone on, of course.
Yeah, because Paul's brothers play
Of course,
bass.
Yep.
So I start doing music for corporates. Mm-hmm. And then I had a friend ring me up. She worked at a video duplication plant. And she said, I've got a client here who wants to dub aerobic videos. And he needs some music for these. And so, you know, would you be interested? And I said, yeah, send him over. So he comes to my place. And he said, you know, I'd like to get music for this. And then he sees my gear and everything. And he says, can you write music for competitive aerobic competitions?
I've just got this image in my head. You might have seen me kind of giggle to myself. I've just got this image of some music in the background with, what's the dude's name with the curly hair? Not Gene Simmons. Oh, never mind. I can't remember his name. I'll cut this bit out.
No.
Richard Simmons.
Richard Simmons, all right.
Yeah, sorry.
I've heard of him. I don't even...
Yeah, he was this flamboyant aerobics guy.
All right.
Aerobics.
Well, this was...
mornings, the music, that's...
All right, okay. Yeah. This was that. So he comes by, he checks out what I do, and he says, you know, can you write music for competitive aerobics? And I said... You know, first of all, I always say sure.
Yeah.
Now, what's the criteria? He said, well, it has to be 1 minute and 50 seconds in length, and it has to be about 160 beats per minute. Mm-hmm. You know, so we're going back to, you know, early 80s. Early 90s. And there wasn't a lot of music that fast back then. So I said, well, what do you guys do? And he said, well, we just take, you know, existing songs and speed them up.
Yeah.
And so the criteria is 1 minute 50 seconds in length, 160 beats per minute on average, and the judging is based on, you know, there's a number of compulsory moves you have to do, and then your creative flair, your choreography, and how well it works to the music.
Yep.
So I've always been this one for just thinking differently about things. So I said, okay, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a click at 160 beats per minute, and I'm going to film you doing your routine.
Yep.
And then I'm going to write music to that.
Yep.
And so we do that. So I've got the file, and I I start creating music, and I start treating it like it's a film. So I'm putting sound effects on it. You know, so when he's jumping and doing push-ups, there's all kind of stuff going on, you know. And he comes back and here's a track, and he's competing for the national championship, so I get invited, you know. And the first 4 or 5 acts, you know, they're jumping around to the Chipmunks, basically, you know. Tina Turner's Simply the Best with the track, you know, it's like, it's Great Balls of Fire. I mean, it was like ridiculous. And the thing that I did with him, he wanted to do the Thunderbirds. So I started off with the actual Thunderbird thing, 5, 4, you know, the countdown. Yep. And then he launches into this, and there's this massive, you know, sub-rumble. Yep. And when you speed up music, it obviously gets very thin. There's no bass in it. But the sound system was a massive PA. So after hearing the Chipmunks, all of a sudden this track comes on. And the room's rumbling. You know, and he's doing this routine, and there's sound effects, and people are just going crazy. People, it was like full on, you know. So he wins, you know, hands down.
Cool.
The championship, then he competes for the world.
Yep.
Wins that hands down. Like, nobody's ever seen anything like this, you know. And then I had everybody come into me. You know, I was writing for, you know, solos, duos, teams, and everything. Right. And, you know, there's a number of gold medals, silver, bronze medals that I was responsible for.
That's great.
And then he referred a friend of his that was competing for Mr. Universe.
Yep.
For Australia, and he came to my place, and I did the same thing. You know, he's doing these poses, and I'm filming him, and I'm doing things like taking a couple of bricks and scraping them together and recording that, and then pitch shifting it 2 octaves lower. So as he flexes, you know, it's going like, you know.
Yeah, wicked.
And then he goes and he competes, and he comes 4th. And they asked him to come back the following year to do his routine again because it was so entertaining. You know?
Yeah.
So, you know, I was just doing... You know,
that's awesome.
That's how I think, you know?
Yeah.
And then shortly after that, there was because the aerobic thing worldwide was starting to happen then, you know?
Yep.
And the medium of playing back things were cassette.
Yep.
You know, I mean, CDs were starting to phase in.
Yep.
And this company, they produce all the cassette for aerobic instructors. So you have high impact, mid impact, low impact, chill down, and all this. So every month they'd have X number of titles. And what I didn't realize is in the aerobic world, they do everything in counts of 8. You know, so every move is done on that. So it's about how popular the songs on your tape are, your mixtape. Yep. And they had a blanket license from all the record companies, so they could use anything. So if they're doing things in counts of 8, and, you know, say it's, you know, the new track by Prince, and it does 4, and then it goes to a bridge, they can't use it. So, once again, early days of digital technology. I had an Atari.
Yep.
And you could cut audio, 2 tracks of audio. So I said, well, why don't I just apply this to that? So if this song needs to extend by 4, I'll just cut that. And so what it then made happen is for all the competitors, we had to jump because we had songs that nobody else had on their tapes. And so they went from selling like, you know, a few hundred a month to, you know, like 700-800 tapes a month. Yeah. And because nobody was doing this. And I found out, you know, around the world nobody was doing this. So that was another thing that just started me off. I was making great money doing this.
Yeah, that's cool. And then we're from there.
Wow. So I was then doing a lot of corporate stuff. I played with a band called Fat Time, and we opened for Joe Cocker. It was a really great band with this girl, Bridget O'Donoghue, Rory O'Donoghue's sister, horn section and everything, and that was a lot of fun. Then I started doing, you know, tours with, I did one with Kevin Borich and Renee Geyer, from here to Cairns and back, you know, by road, and that was great. Marcia. I did video clips and things like that with Barnes and Diesel, Rock Melons. And I played on a track with John Farnham and Daniel Gahar. I did the Rock Melons, the Groove album.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, because I was working at Brash's
when
I first got back here.
Mm-hmm.
And the rep for Tune bases, Tune had just come out. And he came by and he brought one and said, hey, you might want to check this out. And so I took it to the session and played it, man, and loved it. And so I ended up doing that album, but didn't get the tour. When they went on the road, I never got the call. So,
so let's move to Brothers in Oz.
Okay.
Yep.
So I'm not touring on the road anymore. I didn't want to stop playing.
Yep.
So I decided, okay, I'll have a band where, because there was so much work then, you couldn't have a band where everybody was always available.
Gotcha.
So the concept is I would have this band, I'd pick a bunch of songs that we'd all know or may not know, but we're great enough musicians to just improvise. Mm-hmm. So that's been the premise of the Brothers the whole time, you know. No set lists, no rehearsals. It's because I program it live, I'm looking at the audience, I'm gauging what the audience is and what song needs to come next. And just giving everybody the freedom to bring whatever they're going to bring to it. Mm-hmm. So that way it stays spontaneous for me. Because if you play the same songs the same way every time, you get bored. So that's been 26 years.
Yeah, wow. It's impressive. Yeah. And it's kind of been a revolving door, that's for lack of a better term. Who's the sort of cats besides yourself that have always kind of been...
Right. It's one of those things where people will come and they'll be in it for a while and then they'll go away and then they'll come back.
Come back,
Geez. There's been... Even if I count people that have just done like a one-night gig with the Brothers, it's like over 90-odd musicians. Guys will come through and be with me for a period and then they'll go off. And
do something else.
One of the longest-running members would be... Eric Rasmussen, Rex Go, and Calvin Welch. I mean, the very first lineup was I got turned on to Barry Leaf. So Barry was in the band playing rhythm guitar as well. Eric, Scotty Johnston on drums. And then Scotty left and Calvin. Yeah, it was Calvin that came on board. And Calvin Welch, he and I had played with Kevin Borich. I got him with Kevin, so we were a three-piece. And that was really where the name The Brothers of Oz came from.
Right, okay.
So it's KB and The Brothers of Oz.
Yeah.
Mark Williams, after Barry left, then Mark Williams... no, it was Kimmy Tapia. Yeah, Kimmy came on board. I found out that he could sing. I didn't know he played drums. And then he was saying, that was the first band he ever fronted just as a singer. And man, what a great guy.
Right.
Great voice. Then he moved on, and then I had Mark Williams and Erana Clarke. Jo Elms she did it for a while as well. Peter Morgan, he was in it. And I had a gig shortly after that. I had a gig at the City of Sydney RSL, and whoever was booked for vocals didn't show, and it might have just been me forgetting to book somebody because man, I was all over the place then. I was running a company called Corporate Gigs, so I was doing a lot of corporate events and organizing all that. And so I had no singer.
Right.
So I ended up having to step up and doing that. And I think we jammed on like 5 songs for the whole evening. It was definitely a P-Funk thing. You know? Songs were going like 20 minutes, and I had a horn section.
Yeah.
So there's enough to go around.
Yeah. Eurofunk. Now that's
my thing.
That's yours. Yeah. So you want to explain that a little bit?
That's my having grown up in Germany. At the age of 13, I was in nightclubs.
Yep.
As a DJ, because I had all of these albums, and nightclubs then had massive sound systems, and I wasn't into having girlfriends and things then. I was just music, so I started DJing. And so that background of all that rock, and my natural heritage, of funk and blues and all that, it was the fusion of all of that. So and I was in Holland at the time, and I got a call from the government saying, "You need to get out of here." And I put in a case to stay in the country because I was employing Dutch musicians, and the style of music we play is Eurofunk, American funk, with European musicians.
Yeah.
So I went to court on that premise and actually won.
Shit, good stuff.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So I got the stamp.
You got a stamp, yeah.
Yeah.
Eurofunk, yeah. Not just the name plucked out. It's
I got the stamp to stay.
Awesome.
Mm.
Yeah, that's cool. How often are you gigging these days?
Hardly.
Yeah, right.
Hardly ever.
Yep.
I think I mentioned to you before we started that I had been looking at moving to Melbourne.
Yep.
Having come here at a time. Actually, this is what made me come back to Australia after that tour with Chris Hinze. I went back to Holland, and instead of moving to London, I decided to come back to Australia because I'd never been to a place that had that much live music. I mean, back then, every pub just about had a band, And I come back, and I'm touring with Kevin Borich straight away. We're like 7 nights a week, making incredible money. And it always really surprised me how it wasn't considered a profession. I remember trying to get a bank loan, after I was married, we were trying to get a bank loan, and I couldn't put down musician, although I was making more money than the people who were filling out the forms.
Yeah.
On paper, I'm making more money even.
Yeah.
Because, you're a muso, and I never got that here. I never understood what that disrespect for a profession was about.
Right.
Sorry, what was
Yeah, so that's why the gigs sort of...
yes, yeah.
Excellent.
So, Brothers of Oz. There was a cab driver who was a drummer also. They call him the Jazz Cab. But he was the one that had a word to Chris Richards that got me in the basement. And the interesting thing is, having played the basement as an international artist, and I came back and I tried to get a gig there and I couldn't get a gig.
Yep.
And I had to have this guy kind of open the door. But, that became a scene. So it was every second week.
Yep.
And the week in between myself was Doug Williams.
Yep.
So you had Doug Williams and the mix, and then the Brothers of Oz, and that carried on for nearly 4 years, man.
Yeah.
And there would be queues around the block to get in.
Yeah.
And being thrilled with what I do, I would invite anybody to my gig. I remember going through the toll when you had to give coins and just giving them my card and saying, "Hey, give me a call if you want to come to the gig." And to this day, I still have this incredible network of people.
Yeah.
There was one guy at a parking station, invited him to my gig, put him on the guest list with some friends. He turned up, man. And from then on, I had free parking in the city for 2 years.
That's great.
And then he finally moved, he's gone. And then I found him in North Sydney. I had another year of free parking.
Oh, brilliant.
You be kind to people, man, and it comes back to you.
Yeah. How have you seen the scene change the last 5 years? Pretty obvious. How's it affected you directly?
I've been fortunate in that because I do so many things.
Okay.
There's always something else that comes. You
Yep.
know, I mean, I also do technical direction. You know, for concerts and conferences and things like that. You know,
Yep.
organizing sound, lighting, all of the production. So, yeah, I've always got something else happening.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it hasn't sort of affected you too much.
If that was the sole thing I relied on, it would have.
Totally, yeah.
Totally would have.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And because I play music for the enjoyment of it, I'm not really about, playing in cover bands that play the songs exactly the same and doing that. I'd rather do, 101 other things, related to music and studio. I mean, I do a lot of studio production.
Yeah.
I also teach people how to use all this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
That's cool. One thing we said early on, you started a little story about these two clubs and how you got moved from one to the other.
Yeah.
You didn't finish the story.
Okay.
Let's go there.
All these years later, I catch up with the guitarist. I'm interviewing him for my autobiography, and I asked what happened. He said, "You don't remember?" He said, "One night we were on stage, and this really old white dude came in, and he walks through the door and he looks at the band, and he looks around and he looks at the band, and he walks up and stands in front of the stage, just looking at the band. And he goes, 'What are these coons doing in here?'"
Oh.
And that's why we got moved. Whoever he was,
Oh, right.
some
heavy cat.
That's why we got moved.
Right, okay.
And I didn't know that. All I knew is that we got moved,
Right.
And, the other thing that happened that night is I had this Music Man bass by that stage, and I'm playing and I broke a string. I broke the G string. And this guy came up to me and he said, "Oh, what strings are you using?" I said, "Oh, I'm using GHS." And he gives me this card and he says, "Come and see me," and I go and see him, and his name is Sterling Ball. Yeah. And so, I mean, he's like early 20s,
Yeah.
and I go out to the factory and I meet his dad and all this, and it's like, wow.
Oh, shit.
So he gives me like 10 packs of strings.
Yeah.
And the Music Man, which is just over, it's just there.
Yeah.
I had the frets taken out, and these half-round strings he gave me, the same set. They've been on there since, 1980.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so, it was Sterling Ball.
Oh, that's wicked.
Mm.
Yeah. So, any advice for young players?
That brings me to a point that saddens me the most about the demise of the live music scene and what the politicians don't really realize what they've done. They think, most of us think, okay, venues are shut down and musicians are out of work. But what the unseen damage is that those generations that are coming have no exposure to see how it's done.
Yep.
They can play instruments. I mean, the ability to play has been increased tenfold by having access to YouTube.
Of course.
But the ability to perform and engage an audience, that's what's lost.
Yeah.
And you get shows like The Voice and all of that. And your average person thinks, oh, well, there's still, hope, there's these guys out there. But what they don't realize is shows like that only teach you how to perform to a camera lens, not to an audience. Mm-hmm. And there was a singer I saw in The Voice, Miss Murphy, incredible voice. And I remember Darryl Beaton was her musical director, and he invited me to come and see her at a show at Ginger's. And I went, and when I walked in, I realized that the front of house engineer was a student of mine from TAFE. I was teaching at TAFE. And Miss Murphy, she's singing and beautiful and everything, but she's holding the mic, and the whole time for a few songs, the PA was right on the verge of feeding back from her microphone.
Right.
It was quite intimate, and every time the engineer went to push the vocal up a bit, it'd just be right on the cusp, because she's trying to get more level out.
Yeah.
Because the level of the band is great, but the vocal's not. And that's when it dawned on me what was wrong. So I went to the engineer and I said, you're having trouble with the vocal, aren't you? And she said, yeah, you know, everything I do, every time I try to push it up. I said, turn her fold back down. She went, what? So she turns it down by quite a bit. And what Miss Murphy did was bring the mic closer to her mouth. Mm-hmm. So what was happening is she was hearing too much of her voice.
Yeah.
And she's regulating the volume.
Yeah.
By doing this. And the moment that it wasn't so loud, she could come forward and there was a full sound in the sound system.
Yeah.
And that's when I realized, to me, that's stagecraft. That's all these other things that I do, you know, with regards to sound.
Yeah.
Because when I was in Holland and I was running the band, man, I was getting up at like 4 a.m., picking up a truck, going to grab the PA, come to the gig, set the PA up, and then do the sound from side of stage while playing the gig. Because, I know about sound and I know, you know, how I want it to sound.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think to answer your question, was one of the things to pass on, learn about sound.
Yeah.
You know, because that's what you do. Mm-hmm. So you really need to know about it. One of the sad things that I see, there's a store called Big Music, and they have a program, you know, where they put together bands amongst the music students, and they use you know, the guitar player, bass players, they'll have like these pedal boards and things. And that's all great. And the drummer's electronic kit and keyboards. So everything's coming out of a PA. But they don't really spend any time teaching people how to sound good.
Yeah.
You know, and then you see them do the show, you know, at the local festival. And, you know, they're playing great, but the sound is, you know. And I think that's where they fall short by not really teaching that. And I actually approached them with a full-on proposition. The person that was in charge then was kind of, he was too difficult to deal with. But I mean, with what I know, man, I know a lot of stuff that I just want to pass on.
Yeah, yeah.
I've been fortunate enough to pass it on to quite a number of people, you know, and, you know, some of the letters I get back saying, man, thank you for what you did, you know.
Awesome.
The head of sound for the Sydney Theatre Company, he's been there for 10 years. I took him under my wings when he was 18. Man, and he became my front of house engineer, the basement, and for everything else I've done, you know.
Wicked. Yeah. That's really cool.
I just want to pass on what I know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I know every time that somebody gave me a nugget and I ran with it, man, it was invaluable. Yeah,
yeah, that's really cool. And I think on that, Craig Calhoun.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, man. Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, my man.